Hey guys, how you doing? I just want to say sorry I didn't get a video up this weekend. I've ended a show for the first time in a while. And it was like six hour ride each way. I just had a really hectic weekend, so I wasn't able to get anything done. We'll pick up back to, this coming weekend and obviously tonight with this video. I wasn't sure what I was going to do for a tip video this week, but as usual, a lot of my inspiration comes from scrolling various social media platforms and seeing what people are discussing in groups. And cohabitation obviously comes up quite a bit. And this video isn't necessarily to touch on that, but it's to touch on taking studies and taking information and applying it to captive keeping intelligently. A lot of times people will take one little snippet of something and turn it into something more. And that's what happened in this situation. So somebody was asking, of course, if they can cohabitate their ball pythons. Obviously most people said, no, it's not a good idea, which of course it's not a good idea. Now to say that it's impossible to do it is not correct either, but there's no benefit to the animals and you're taking risks. The risks might be minor if you do everything perfectly, but there's always risks. The two animals, for some reason, something happens and there's conflict. Something bad can happen. Your animal can die, all these things. But anyways, so the snippet from this particular study that they were using, and it wasn't even a study, it was, bits and pieces of multiple studies taken out and dissected and put together. And that's something that you need to think about when you see things like this, because they posted where they're getting their source information from, which really made them look foolish ultimately. So you want to remember, where is the information coming from? What kind of source? The person's experience who's presenting the information. And then, of course, how does that information apply to captive keeping? So this particular snippet said that from November to January, pairs or groups of ball pythons can be found sharing burrows, and that females are found brooding clutches together through March. So from November to March, behavior seen where these animals are being somewhat communal. Now, why are they being communal? Obviously, for animals to breed, they have to come together, at least with snakes. There's other species that do things different way, but snakes actually breed and lock up and pair up. And so they have to share area in order to do that. You want your breeding to be successful. So if they just came together for a few minutes and went separate ways, that may not be successful. So they want to spend a little bit of time together and, breed a few times and see what's going to happen. Also, as far as the females brooding eggs together, think about the reasons why they would be doing that. Now, we know that a lot of ball pythons, when it comes to egg laying and nesting, do so in abandoned animal burrows. Now, that also has been spun the other way for people to say, oh, that's the only place they live, which isn't necessarily true. Ball pythons do like to feel secure and do like to hide, but they will actively come out and search for food and actively come out and search for resources. Typically, dawn and dusk is when they're going to do that. Occasionally, that might mean out during the day, but that's not that common. So this information gets spun both directions depending on who wants to present it or what they're trying to say. But the reality is the females brooding together, there's only so many abandoned animal burrows to go around in a given area. So chances are you're going to end up with females in the same area. Now, females typically, when they're nesting, don't really eat much. If food happens to come along, they'll take it. Occasionally, they'll leave the eggs in some species to go get a quick meal and come back. But typically, they're not really worried about guarding resources or anything at that point in time. They're just worried about protecting their own eggs. So as long as those other females stay away from their eggs, they don't care that they're there. So that doesn't mean that they're being communal. It doesn't mean that they're actively seeking each other. It just means that they happen to find a location that's good to nest. And so multiple snakes found the same good location. That's fairly common. It's not like, snakes that hibernate together and it's the same thing in that case, where they're finding a common area that suits their needs. And so multiples end up in that place. And then with a lot of those snakes that do, truly hibernate like that, or brewmate, whatever you want to call it, they use the same den year after year. And so, of course, more and more snakes end up there over time, and eventually you end up with a large amount. I didn't even say, I'm using one of my T-positive females here for this one. But so anyways, so this person went on to say because of that behavior that it makes sense to cohabitate them. And that's not the case. They're coming together by necessity. They're not coming together because they want each other's company. They're not coming together for any reason other than they have to in order to do what nature intended them to do, which is, you know, propagate the species and make more bloods or balls or garter snakes or whatever species we're talking about. They need to come together in order to do that. So while, yes, you can cohab snakes and they might do fine, it's not really something that's advisable. And so this person was really stretching that information. And the problem is now someone's going to see that and think, oh, okay, that makes sense. And now it's okay for me to do. They're not going to have much experience. They're not going to notice the warning signs that the animals are having conflict or having issues or are competing for resources or competing for space. You know, maybe they're competing for a hide, competing for what they think is the best spot in the cage, competing over the water source. Whatever it is, you might not notice because they tend to be kind of a passive-aggressive species. So you might not see that going on. That might stress out the animals. One gets sick, now the other one's sick. So it's just not a good idea. It's not a good idea to cohab animals, period, if you're not super experienced. That's something that somebody that's been keeping a species for 10, 20, 30 years might be trying. That's not something that somebody that's had one or two of a species should even be thinking about in almost all cases. There's a couple of species that do really well together, but they are few and far between. So cohabitation serves no purpose to the example on this is ball pythons. It's not doing anything positive for the snakes. They're not socially, you know, hanging out. They're not like, let's go bask together today. It's not something that they do. So you're basically taking a risk with no reward, just for yourself, just for the sake of your ego or whatever it is, because you want to say you did it, or you don't want to have to deal with 2 enclosures. I don't know what reasoning people come up to do stuff like this. But you really need to be careful when you're out there. Giving information, one, is super, super important, and people need to take it serious. You could potentially kill or, you know, injure someone's animal through the advice that you give them. And so I know personally I take that very, very seriously. And so anything that I'm telling you is either stuff that I know to be true, or I'll let you know this is my opinion based on my experience, but I've had a lot of experience with these animals before I'm going to tell you this is what you should be doing or this is what I do. And a lot of people don't take that serious, and I think that's really, really bad. And I see a lot of people giving advice that have had snakes for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and it's not really enough time. Like, you don't even understand your own animals yet, let alone helping somebody with theirs. And one of the most difficult things to do is help people from afar, because you're not there, you're not hands-on, you're not seeing the situation. So you're getting information through their eyes and then having to try to interpret that and then help them solve a problem. So with a lot of experience, you can do that to some extent, but it's always difficult because maybe they're not giving you the information you really need. Maybe what they're seeing is not what's actually happening. They might be saying, oh, my snake is restless, but really it's just normal behavior for that species, or oh, my snake's lethargic, but it's normal behavior for that species. So it's difficult to do things like that. So everything that you see and everything that you read, you've got to apply some common sense, and you've got to really make sure that the information is from a good source, and make sure that it's going to apply to captive keeping. There's a lot of things that wild animals do because they have to do it. Not because they want to do it, but that's how they survive. We should be controlling their environment in a way to help them survive and thrive. Thriving is really important. You're not just looking for survival. You're looking for the animals to do the best they could possibly do. So cohabitating species that don't cohabitate isn't helping them thrive the best that they can thrive. During breeding season, if you want to keep a pair that you're trying to breed together for an extended period of time, not such a huge deal. As long as they're getting along well, everything's going fine. Okay, that's that season. That's normal behavior for them. You're not putting the animals into a situation they wouldn't put themselves into. So that's not as big of a deal. But to do it year-round is not something that we have any behavior observed for. We have seasonal behavior, and now this person's suggesting to stretch that out into year-round behavior, which is not natural. And once again, doesn't mean you're going to have an issue. You could have animals live together for 50 years and things could go fine. You can also have animals together for 2 days and one of them ends up dead. I know situations where one snake killed another within minutes of introduction. It happens. Certain species more so than others. Ball pythons just happen to put up with it more because their reaction when they want to defend themselves is to often ball up and is to, go into more of a defensive mode than, on the offensive, so to speak, to be defensive. Whereas a male retic, you put two male retics together, they're going to kill each other almost 100% of the time, or they're going to try to, because that's their way of defending their territory, their space, whatever, is to go after and kill that other animal. So ball pythons just happen to get subjected to this stuff a lot more because of their nature, but it doesn't mean that it's any less stressful for them. So keep that stuff in mind. Same thing goes with these studies you see about ball pythons being arboreal or semi-arboreal. Look at their structure. Does that look like a semi-arboreal snake to you? Does that skeleton scream, I'm built for climbing trees? No. They're opportunistic animals. They will go where the food is. If the food is up a tree, they will go up a tree. It doesn't mean that that's where they want to spend their time. That's not where they're hanging out. That's not where they're nesting. That's not where they're doing anything other than pursuing a meal that they need to survive. So yeah, they can climb a little bit. They're not as clumsy as, say, a blood python, but they're also not as home climbing as a retic or as a berm or as a carpet python or, an Amazon tree boa, that stuff that's actually designed to live in that niche and use that niche, at least some of the time. So you got to keep those things in mind. People will take these little snippets, this little bit of isolated information, and then take it to an extreme. And like I said, it goes both directions. People will use it to excuse poor husbandry. They'll use it to excuse poor practices. So try to use some common sense. Try to read all the information available and try to look at what it says. Because if you read that snippet that the person put further down, it said there's a lot of reasons not to cohab right in the snippet that they used to try to say to cohab. But they ignored that part and just went on to the other part. So try not to do that. Try to look at everything available. Try to use your common sense. Try to do what's going to be best for the animals. Forcing the animal, we don't know. There's an off possibility that maybe there's a social structure we're not aware of in snakes, but we don't know that it's there. So to put that on them when we can't prove that there's a single benefit to it really isn't a good idea when we know there are risks. There's 100% risks. Those exist. We know that. We don't know that there's any benefit. So do you really want to take risks with the possibility that there's no benefit? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You guys own your own animals. You do what you like. But I don't think that that's very prudent. It's not something that I would do. My animals are only together for breeding season, for breeding purposes. If I am not planning on breeding those animals, they will not see each other. If they're together, that means I'm comfortable with that pair breeding, and I'm comfortable with how they get along. For instance, I keep olive pythons. Olive pythons can be cannibalistic. My pair happens to get along fantastic. So I'm comfortable leaving them together for somewhat long periods of time. I still separate them, but I'll leave them together sometimes as long as like 2 weeks. And they do great together. They've never had any conflict. They seem to, pair up together when they're breeding. And if, one's over here, the other one follows, but they're not in each other's space. They're just next to each other. So I'm not going to say that they enjoy each other's company, but they do tend to pair up and stay together and breed for a couple of months on and off. And then, you'll notice that they're not interested in being together. They'll be on opposite ends of the cage. Once you see that with breeding, you know that it's time to pull those animals apart, that they're no longer interested, or at least pull them apart for a while, and you can try reintroducing later if you haven't gotten your desired results. But the animals will really tell you what's going on if you learn how to read their behavior. So that takes time, that takes experience. It's going to take making some mistakes sometimes too. So just be aware of who you're getting advice from. And if you're one of those people that have only been keeping for, less than a couple of years and a very small number of animals, maybe not so much jump out there and give advice. Unless you know 100% of what you're saying and you understand it yourself, don't just parrot. It doesn't help anybody. You're putting people in danger without even realizing it. Your intentions might be good, but the results might not be. I'm kind of droning on here a little bit, so I'm going to cut it short. We'll see you Thursday with a Meet the Collection segment. I don't know who I'm going to use yet, but I'll grab somebody and we'll do that. and then we'll come up with something for Saturday. I would love for you guys to pitch me some ideas for videos that you'd like to see. I know everybody always wants to see the collection video or whatever. I like doing it individually, give you a little more one-on-one with the animals. Someday, if I ever have a chance to like go through the room, I'll do that. I really wanted to do a live video, but it won't let me because I don't have enough subscribers. So share the stuff, get some people subscribed. Once I hit 1,000, then I can go live. I can go live now on a computer, but I don't own a computer. I only have my phone. So until we hit 1,000, we can't do that. But I will do that when I can go live. It's just going to be too long of a video for me to try to do it the way that my setup is. I have to pull down caging, individual caging, and all this stuff, and it just takes time. It would be a horrendously long video. So pitch me some ideas. I'm going to go put her away. I'm going to eat something. I got to feed a couple snakes, and we'll upload this. We'll see you guys.